into the white abyss. The Byrd Antarctic Expedition. Prologue. A whisper in the ice. The Antarctic wind tore across the frozen wasteland with a ferocity that seemed almost deliberate, as if the earth itself were trying to drive away any who dared to intrude upon its endless white silence. The horizon stretched on for miles, an unbroken tapestry of ice and snow. The sky above as pale as bone, casting a ghostly glow upon the barren world below. In the distance, the jagged peaks of the transantarctic mountains loomed like sentinels, silent and unmoving. Standing at the edge of this desolate expanse, Admiral Richard E. Byrd took in the vast emptiness that stretched before him, feeling the weight of history in the chill air. It was 1928, and Byrd, already a legend in his own time, was determined to make history again, to achieve what no man had ever done before, fly over the South Pole. But as he stood there, gazing out into the wilderness, he could feel an inexplicable pull, something deep within the ice, something ancient, stirring beneath the frozen surface. It was a pull he couldn't explain, a whisper he couldn't ignore, and as he stood at the threshold of the unknown, Byrd couldn't shake the sense that his expedition was destined for something far greater than he had ever imagined. Far beneath the ice, a secret waited to be uncovered, one that would shatter the very foundations of everything mankind believed to be true. Chapter 1. A journey to the edge of the world. Admiral Byrd had spent his life charting unknown territories, first as a pilot in World War I, then as a pioneering explorer of the North and South Poles. Now, in the summer of 1928, he stood on the verge of his greatest undertaking yet. With the support of private donors and the U.S. Navy, Byrd had assembled an expedition of men, ships, and cutting-edge technology, ready to chart a course to the furthest reaches of Earth. The two ships, the City of New York and Eleanor Bowling, were loaded with supplies, equipment, and provisions. As the expedition made its way southward, the icebergs grew larger, towering like frozen monoliths, their jagged edges piercing the sky. The air grew thinner, colder, more unforgiving with each passing day. Yet, despite the relentless environment, the crew pushed on, driven by a singular purpose, to reach the South Pole and make their mark on history. The journey south was grueling, the men constantly battling exhaustion, frostbite, and the ever-present threat of the ice claiming their ships. The towering mountains and endless white wilderness seemed to close in around them, suffocating in their starkness. The sun, which had once shone brightly on the horizon, gradually began to dip lower, its golden light flickering as if it, too, were hesitant to venture further south. The days stretched on in an unyielding twilight, the eerie glow of the sun casting long, shifting shadows across the ice. But it wasn't the cold that Byrd felt the most. The cold was expected, a natural part of the environment. No, it was something far more unsettling, the feeling that they were being watched. The men spoke of strange shadows moving across the ice at night, figures that appeared to shift and disappear at the edges of their vision. But each time they ventured out to investigate, there was nothing to be found. The wind howled, as if mocking them, and the ice groaned beneath their feet, a deep resonant sound that seemed almost alive. It was as if the land itself held secrets, things it was reluctant to share. Byrd, always the rational man, dismissed the growing unease as the result of isolation and fatigue. Yet deep within his heart, a sense of dread began to take root. Something was out there, something ancient, something waiting. Chapter 2. Little America and the Endless Night. Byrd and his crew finally established their base of operations on the Ross Ice Shelf, naming it Little America in honor of the spirit of exploration that had led them here. The site, nestled against the towering ice cliffs, was both a sanctuary and a prison. From here, Byrd and his men would launch their flights over the pole, conduct scientific research, and explore the desolate landscape that stretched beyond the horizon. Despite the constant battle against the elements, temperatures plunging to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, winds that could strip the flesh from bone, the men worked tirelessly. Their Ford tri-motor aircraft, a marvel of modern engineering, took to the skies each day, carving paths through the frigid air as they charted new terrain. But the cold was only one of the dangers they faced. There was also the ever-present sense of isolation, the feeling that they were alone in a vast, indifferent universe. The days blurred into each other, a never-ending cycle of work, rest, and exploration. The sun never fully set, nor did it fully rise. It hovered just above the horizon, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to stretch across the ice like fingers reaching for the sky. And in the stillness of the night, if it could even be called night, there were whispers low and insistent, as if the land itself were speaking. Byrd's men began to suffer from vivid, disturbing dreams. Some spoke of towering ice spires, of strange structures buried beneath the snow, glowing with an eerie light. Others claimed to have seen figures moving beneath the ice, their forms indistinct, but undeniably real. The dreams were all the same, visions of something ancient and vast, hidden beneath the frozen surface. Byrd, ever the pragmatist, chalked it up to the stresses of isolation, yet even he couldn't ignore the sense that something was watching them from the ice. Something ancient, something that had lain dormant for eons, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Chapter 3. The Discovery. It was on one of their exploratory flights that Byrd and his team made the discovery that would change everything. As they flew over the ice, scanning the landscape below, something unusual caught Byrd's eye. A perfect, circular hole in the ice nearly a mile in diameter. The edges of the hole were smooth, as if carved by some unknown force, and the ice surrounding it was strangely unbroken. No cracks, no fissures, no signs of geological activity. Byrd's heart raced as he ordered the aircraft to descend. His crew protested, warning that the instruments were behaving erratically, compasses spinning wildly, temperature readings spiking. But Byrd's curiosity got the better of him. They had come this far. What was one more risk? As the aircraft descended toward the hole, Byrd's heart skipped a beat. Beneath them, in the center of the ice, a sprawling city lay hidden, its towering crystalline spires reaching toward the sky. The structures were impossibly advanced, their designs unlike anything seen in the modern world. And in the center of it all, an enormous structure, an obelisk perhaps, pulsed with a strange blue glow. The city was unlike anything they had ever imagined. Its geometry was alien, its architecture both beautiful and terrifying. Byrd's mind raced as he considered the implications. What was this place? How had it come to be buried beneath the ice? Chapter 4. Beneath the ice. When Byrd and his men landed near the entrance to the buried city, the air was inexplicably warm, a stark contrast to the biting cold of the outside world. As they ventured deeper into the city, the walls seemed to shimmer, as if the ice itself were alive, shifting and pulsating with an unnatural energy. The city was eerily silent, save for the low hum of the energy flowing through its walls. The structures were adorned with intricate carvings, symbols and glyphs that defied all understanding. Machines lay dormant, their purpose and function beyond the comprehension of the men. And at the heart of it all, the obelisk stood, its surface covered in ancient glowing runes. But it wasn't until they encountered the Eldari that Byrd truly understood the gravity of their discovery. The Eldari were beings unlike any the men had ever seen. Tall, luminous figures with eyes that seemed to hold the knowledge of millennia. They communicated not through words, but through thoughts and images, directly transmitting their knowledge into Byrd's mind. "You are not the first to find us," one of them conveyed, its voice a whisper in Byrd's mind. "But you must remember, some knowledge is not meant for those above." The Eldari spoke of a time long past, when their civilization had flourished beneath the surface of the earth, hidden from the chaos above. They spoke of great cataclysms that had shattered the world, of ancient forces that had been sealed away to protect the planet. And they spoke of the creature, an ancient entity that had been imprisoned deep within the ice. The seal was weakening. The discovery of their city had disrupted the balance. And now the creature that had once been sealed beneath the ice was stirring. It was waking. Chapter 5. The awakening Byrd and his team had made their way deep into the heart of the ancient city, the air growing thick with a palpable sense of foreboding. The Eldari, their luminous forms flickering like ghostly beacons, had led them further, speaking of a time long past when their civilization had ruled beneath the surface of the earth. But now, their voices had become tinged with a quiet urgency, a warning that pressed in on them from every direction. The immense cavern in which they stood seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The walls shimmered with a faint glow, as if the very ice had come alive. Strange glyphs were etched into the surfaces, their meanings inscrutable, yet undeniably ancient. The air itself hummed with the resonance of something far greater than anything Byrd had ever encountered. As they ventured deeper into the city, the sensation of being watched only grew stronger. It was as if the entire place were alive, aware of their presence, waiting for something to unfold. Byrd could hear his heart pounding in his chest, the only sound that seemed natural in the otherwise unnatural stillness of the city. The Eldari had been unusually silent, and Byrd couldn't help but feel the weight of their gaze as they watched. From the shadows, they had taken them as far as they could, perhaps farther than they should have. Their earlier warning still echoed in Byrd's mind. You must leave, or it will wake. But it was already too late. Byrd reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and placed it upon the surface of an ancient obelisk that rose from the center of the cavern. It pulsed with an eerie, unearthly light, as if it were alive, as if it were feeding on the energy of the city around it. The moment his fingers made contact, the hum of the air intensified. A deep guttural rumble reverberated through the walls, shaking the ground beneath them. The men froze. The world around them seemed to stand still for a heartbeat. Then, the ice began to crack. The sound was deafening, like the splitting of the very earth itself. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, and the air became thick with an oppressive weight. Byrd's breath caught in his throat as the walls trembled, the air growing colder despite the heat emanating from the obelisk. Suddenly, the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The floor cracked open, and from the depths of the cavern, a low, guttural growl echoed through the icy expanse. Byrd's blood ran cold. The creature had awakened. A dark presence, vast and formless, began to emerge from the depths of the cavern, pushing through the ice with an ease that defied all logic. The creature's form seemed to ripple and distort, as if it were bending reality itself, warping the very fabric of space and time around it. Its shape was ever shifting, not solid, but a mass of swirling shadows and energy, an unnatural amalgamation of all that was feared and unknown. Byrd stumbled backward, his hand still resting on the obelisk, now searing with energy. His mind reeled as the creature began to rise. Its presence alone bent the air, distorting the light around it into grotesque shapes and shadows. He could hear the cries of his men, but they seemed distant, muffled by the overwhelming power that flooded the cavern. The Eldari had retreated to the far side of the cavern, their once luminous forms dimming in the presence of the creature. They raised their hands in unison, and Byrd could hear their thoughts reverberating in his mind, sharp and full of despair. We are not strong enough. It is too late. You must leave. Now. But Byrd couldn't move. His body felt heavy, as if some was pressing him down, keeping him rooted to the spot. He could hear the creature's deep, resonant growl, the sound of something ancient and incomprehensible awakening after eons of slumber. The creature's form seemed to stretch and twist, tendrils of darkness reaching out to consume everything in its path. The air grew colder, the ice cracking and splintering as the creature's influence spread outward. Byrd's mind was reeling, struggling to make sense of what was happening. But there was no explanation, no understanding that could encompass the sheer terror unfolding before them. One of the men, Lieutenant Douglas, had fallen to his knees, clutching his head as if in pain. His screams filled the cavern, and Byrd could see the color draining from his face. He was being consumed by something not just physical, but something deeper, something that gnawed at the soul itself. His mind, like so many others who would encounter this entity, was unraveling, breaking apart under the weight of the creature's presence. The Eldari, despite their ethereal nature, seemed powerless against the being that now surged forward, pulsing with energy that seemed to defy the laws of nature. They began chanting in a language that Byrd couldn't understand, their voices growing louder and more desperate. But the creature didn't stop. It continued to rise, its vast form blotting out the flickering light that had once illuminated the cavern. "It is too late," the Eldari communicated, their thoughts laced with sorrow. "The seal is broken. The heart of the void has been disturbed." Then, the ice began to crack. The sound was deafening, like the splitting of the very earth itself. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, and the air became thick with an oppressive weight. Byrd's breath caught in his throat as the walls trembled, the air growing colder despite the heat emanating from the obelisk. Suddenly the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The floor cracked open, and from the depths of the cavern, a low, guttural growl echoed through the icy expanse. Byrd's blood ran cold. The creature had awakened. Byrd could feel it then, an icy tendril of power creeping through his mind, taking hold. The very fabric of reality around him seemed to warp, like ripples in water, as the creature's influence reached into his thoughts. It whispered to him, not in words but in emotions, in flashes of terrifying visions. He saw the earth torn asunder by cataclysmic storms, cities swallowed by the sea, sky-choking darkness, burning with fire, and through it all the creature, its terrible, all-consuming, gaze fixed upon the world above, its hunger endless. The ice beneath Byrd's feet cracked wider, splintering like glass. The ground shifted, and the sound of twisting metal and groaning stone filled the air as the city began to crumble. Byrd's men were scrambling, their eyes wide with terror as they tried to flee, but the ice, now alive with the creature's power, was closing in on them. Byrd felt his heart hammering in his chest, panic rising. He had to leave, but his body felt rooted to the spot, unable to move. The ice cracked again, and this time the tremor was different. Deeper, more resonant, as if the very earth itself were groaning in pain. And then, in a final, deafening crack, the heart of the void shattered. A violent wave of energy surged outward, consuming everything in its path. Byrd's mind was overwhelmed by the sheer force of it, visions, sounds, sensations all crashing together in a chaotic, maddening storm. The creature, now fully awake, unleashed its power in an unholy scream that reverberated through the very bones of the earth. The Eldari were no match for the creature's fury. Their glowing forms flickered and dimmed as they struggled to hold the monster at bay, but their powers were not enough. Byrd could feel the ground beneath him shudder and break apart as the creature's tendrils reached out, consuming everything in their path. In a last desperate attempt, Byrd managed to turn and run. The world around him seemed to dissolve, collapsing into darkness as the creature's power consumed the very air, warping time and space. The walls of the cavern twisted, and Byrd felt himself falling, tumbling through a chasm of light and shadow. Then, the ice began to crack. The sound was deafening, like the splitting of the very earth itself. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, and the air became thick with an oppressive weight. Byrd's breath caught in his throat as the walls trembled, the air growing colder despite the heat emanating from the obelisk. Suddenly, the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The floor cracked open, and from the depths of the cavern, a low, guttural growl echoed through the icy expanse. Byrd's blood ran cold. The creature had awakened. The last thing Byrd saw before everything went black was the face of Lieutenant Douglas, his eyes wide with terror. A final scream frozen on his lips as the darkness swallowed them whole. Epilogue. The last transmission. Years passed. The world moved on, but Byrd never forgot what lay beneath the ice. One evening, as he sat in his study, the old radio beside him crackled to life. A faint signal, almost imperceptible, came through. A voice. It was distant, yet unmistakable. "Awaken, the Myri." Transmission was brief, But Byrd knew what it meant. The seal had broken. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.